Shalom and welcome to the European Report. Here we are in the European Parliament in the heart of the European Union, and in today's programme we'll be discussing this Parliament's decision to freeze over 15 million euros to the Palestinian Authority over its education system. And in this programme today I'm joined by Tomas Sandell, the founder and director of the European Coalition for Israel, and Markus Sheff, the CEO of Impact SE, and Anders Vistisen, our Danish MP. So welcome to the programme. Tomas, I'll start off with you, because I know that you've had a very busy month last month in the UN. We missed you on the last programme. So share with us some of the activities you and also ECI have been involved in.
Well, Simon, again, it's good to be back, and I think I'll just focus on what I would consider to be a major achievement. We were very happy to be at the United Nations on the eve of just a few days before Rosh Hashanah, the new Jewish New Year, and also on the occasion of the opening session of the 73rd General Assembly, to mark this day through a Jewish ceremony which is called Tashliya. Not many people are familiar with that, but for us it was again a way of showing how Jewish culture has contributed so much to the international community, and to have the Secretary General Antonio Guterres participate and speak and take part in this ceremony for us was a great opportunity also to show that we must have had around 60 UN ambassadors, and that's a good number when you usually look at the voting behavior in the United Nations, that there are still that many nations that want to honor the State of Israel, the Jewish culture, the Jewish people, and take part in such an event. So to be able to co-host this together with the Israeli mission, with Ambassador Danny Danon, was for us a great milestone and something we're very happy about. And I would say this was the highlight, at least for the month of September.
Fantastic. And Markus, absolute pleasure to have you on the European Report. I know you from when you were the director of the Israel Project, and you did a great job there. Now you're the CEO of Impact SE. Can you explain to us what your organisation does and the latest findings of looking into the Palestinian national curriculum?
Absolutely. Lovely to see you again, and wonderful to be with such distinguished guests. And let me tell you first of all a little bit about why you need an organisation like Impact SE. I think we all understand how important textbooks are. They are uniquely authoritative. More than any other medium that young people receive, any other form of communication, textbooks give young people a level of authority that nothing else will. Not social media, not something they are told by friends, and not something which they might or might not hear in a religious institution. They are also incredibly powerful. They have the ability to radicalize young people, and unfortunately we see that time and time again. They also have this incredible ability to be a barrier to radicalization if the people who write the textbooks and distribute them want that to happen. So we look at textbooks through UNESCO-derived standards of peace and tolerance. We look at respect for the individual, respect for the other, peacemaking as the way to resolve conflict, no hate, obviously, economic prosperity, which is very important. And we look at every single curriculum through the same frame, through the same prism, so that we get, with every curriculum we look at, a set of results which all make sense and which can all be academically used. In the Middle East at the moment, there are important positive changes going on. In Morocco, Tunisia, Jordan, Egypt is improving its curriculum. The Israeli curriculum is very progressive in relation to the way it talks about the Palestinian other, that peace runs through that curriculum. Sadly, there are places where curricula have got worse. Those are Turkey, Iran. The Syrian curriculum, which we just reviewed, was actually quite shocking in many ways. But we are here at the moment in Parliament because of the Palestinian curriculum. And the Palestinians created a new curriculum. In 2016, they finished the job at the end of 2017, and it is, in many ways, the most radical curriculum we have studied.
Cool. And Anders, welcome back to the programme. Firstly, I want to thank you so much for your brave and courageous stand that you take in this parliament on behalf of Israel and the Jewish people. What do you make of the excellent work being carried out by Impact SE and their latest research project looking into the national curriculum of the Palestinian Authority?
I think it's a very important work, and it's a continuing work that we have seen your NGO and other NGOs trying to carry forward from the last 5 to 10 years. Unfortunately, we have not seen a positive change, and unfortunately, we're only now seeing some sort of action from the European side. I think that is largely to do with a number of national states in Europe, also on the background of the work of these NGOs that have nationally taken up this issue, and therefore I think now Europe is in a position where we at least need to freeze it and to look it over. But I'm afraid it's a little bit too late when it comes to this, because 10 years is an entire school education for a child. So every year that goes by, we have a new generation who are educated and formed by the opinions of these colloquiums.
Very good. And Marcus, your organisation, Impact SE, has produced a 67-page report that looks at the academic year from 2018 to 2019. Can you give us examples where you have found violence, hate speech, glorification of jihad, martyrdom, anti-Israeli sentiment, or even anti-Semitism within these school textbooks?
Sadly, I can give you too many, but just to relate to Anders' comment, he is so right. Every single day that the curriculum is taught, today 1.2 million Palestinian children were taught this curriculum of hate. Every single day, every single month, every single year that generation after generation of young Palestinians are taught this, they are lost to the possibility of peaceful coexistence. In terms of the examples, martyrdom is encouraged to a greater extent than anything we have seen before. Mathematics is taught by telling young people to add martyrs from the first intifada and the second intifada, and how many do you have. The physics textbooks have a picture of a young Palestinian who is using a slingshot, and that is how they are taught about Newton's second law of motion. Religious Salafi ideas are now on the increase. So they are told that death is a privilege, that their role is to sacrifice themselves. In anti-Semitism, that is crept back into the curriculum, and it wasn't necessarily there before over the last 2 or 3 years. So now you have passages asking young Palestinians to explain the Jewish attempts to kill the Prophet, and that Jews and Israelis are essentially damned. This is generation after generation of young Palestinians across grades from 1 to 12 and across subjects, as I said, from Islamic studies to language to math, being purposefully radicalized by the Palestinian Authority.
And Tomas, I know that the issue of Palestinian incitement and hatred, whether that's in the education system or the media, is an issue that you've worked on tirelessly now for well over a decade. But in terms of good news, what do you make of the brave and courageous decision taken by this Parliament, particularly the European Parliament's Budgetary Commission, to freeze over 15 million euros in funding to the Palestinian Authority until they actually stop this incitement in their school textbooks and education system?
I would agree again with Mr. Vistisen and say sometimes too little too late. We saw this trend also with the last European Parliament. If I recall correctly, the chairman of the Budgetary Control Committee wrote an op-ed in Wall Street Journal 2 weeks before the last elections, where he basically said the same things that we are saying in this program, that there were major problems in EU funding to the Palestinian Authority. But I'm asking myself, why did he wait those 5 years to write that op-ed? You know, he had 5 full years to get a change. So we also have to remember that this particular vote in the Budgetary Control Committee will come to a vote in the plenary session in just a few weeks' time. There are no guarantees that we will have a majority for the opinion of the Budgetary Control Committee. But nevertheless, I think there is momentum. So we should focus on the positive. There is momentum, and as it was mentioned here, there are so much so many things going on a national level. We've been working together in Finland, and we know as a result of the work that we did there, the foreign minister came out and said, well, I have to say, in order to get the message across, there needed to be a breaking news in one of the leading tabloids. And then all of a sudden, all the politicians came out and said, well, this is, it's not acceptable. We have to do something. We have to stop it. So they have made their commitments. The foreign minister, we did a grassroots campaign to the government and say, what are you going to do to stop this incitement, the funding of the Palestinian Education Ministry? And they came back and said, listen, we are going to look into this. We're going to have an internal review. And as we all know, there will be an international review from the major donor countries, including the European Commission. So there's definitely momentum going on, but I think we should not take anything for granted. We really need to see this through, so that we on every level can tackle this. And here we need civil society in Europe, we need Israel, we need responsible members of parliament like Mr. Vistisen to really see a change.
Absolutely. And Anders, is this vote by the European Parliament's budgetary committee signifying a new growing power here in the European Parliament against the Commission? Or do you take kind of Tomas's approach, was a little bit more sceptical in terms of thinking that the European Union is a major donor to the Palestinian Authority, particularly to its education system, and we've seen this incitement to hatred now last over 25 years, ever since the establishment of the Palestinian Authority through the framework of the Oslo Accords?
I think the nature of many committees in this parliament is that they become very specific in their mindset. And I actually think the Budgetary Control Committee has done a quite important work in many fields here in the European Parliament. But I share the skepticism that even though it's the same numerically parties that are represented there as in the wider parliament, I share the skepticism that their view, because it's so specific on fraud and waste of EU money, and therefore they have a special mindset in that committee, I share the skepticism that it doesn't necessarily translate into the wider parliament. I did an event with NGO Monitor, I think almost 3 years ago in this parliament, about exactly this topic, the curriculum of school books. And at that time we had representatives there from the External Action Service, we had from the Commission, we had from the wider Parliament, and nothing happened for almost 3 years. So I'm hoping to be positive, but my realistic estimation is that I would see it before I believe it in the wider parliament, especially after last plenary session, where there was a lot of talk about making up the contributions to the Palestinian Authority that the US has committed to withdraw from. So actually the talk in the wider parliament was to spend more on the Palestinian Authority, not to freeze or review the spending to the authority.
Marcus, please share with us the impact that the Palestinian education system has had on Palestinian children in particular, in terms of incitement, in terms of the peace process, and how has this damaged relations with Israel?
Well, the facts and the evidence are there. When you have a 16-year-old just 3 weeks ago who commits an act of terror against innocent civilians, you can imagine this young person spending the last 10 years in school, still in school now, being fed a steady diet of hate. The leap between the hate which he is consuming and acting out that hate is very small indeed. There is evidence of Palestinian terrorists who, during their having been taken by the police and during the investigation, have said the Palestinian curriculum states very clearly that my actions need to be what they were. So there is clear evidence of a link between teaching hate and acts of terror, and by the way, there is academic evidence outside of the Palestinian Authority. So, one doesn't have to go very far in, whatsoever. When ISIS rolled into Mosul, the first thing they did was change the curriculum because they understood the power of school curricula. The academic material is out there for everybody to see. Journalists go and interview Palestinian children and they mouth to camera things which we can show are directly linked to the curriculum which they studied. They mouth hate. They mouth, frankly, ideas which are terrifying in 2018. And yet, this parliament is committed to a two-state solution, is committed to money going to the Palestinian Authority in order to support a two-state solution. The curriculum which young people in the Palestinian Authority are studying couldn't be more different to the idea of a two-state solution. It doesn't actually appear in there. There is no peace education whatsoever. They're given one vision, Palestine from the river to the sea, and there is actually an example where it says Palestine is from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. So the idea that a body which is giving money for a particular purpose when exactly the opposite purpose is in fact being taught, and assuming that that is okay is of course slightly strange.
Yeah. And Tomas, isn't it time that we started to hold many of the Palestinian leaders to account, and also some of the commissioners as well, for actually funding this education system now for over 25 years, which you can really describe it as state-sponsored child abuse, couldn't you?
Mm-hmm. We have a great opportunity in 8 months' time with the European Parliament elections, obviously, and I think it's timely that these issues will be raised at this time, because if we want to see a change, we have to raise these questions during the election campaign. And also, on a national level, obviously, we have to make our leaders accountable. We know from the case of Finland that they are not very comfortable talking about these things. When they see the actual textbooks, they all react in the same way, which is the normal reaction to say, well, this cannot be true. If it's true, we have to stop it tomorrow. But the problem is, again, with the civil servants. So I don't want to think in terms of conspiracies, but sometimes it doesn't help, even if we change a foreign minister, if you have it so deeply embedded in the ministries, be it the education ministers or be it the foreign ministries, where there is a long tradition of unconditionally supporting these regimes without asking these difficult critical questions. But I think there are ways in which we can also make them accountable. But in order to do so, we need these hard facts, and that's why it's been so productive to work together with Impact and other organizations, because we don't have the resources. I have to say, having mentioned your important work, I feel a little bit ashamed in Europe with all the enormous resources we have that we haven't felt that it has been important to do a proper evaluation. We should have been doing the work that you are doing.
Absolutely.
And I think funded clearly with European funds to say, listen, how is the money we're putting into the peace process, what kind of dividends is it paying? And when we see in the results, further radicalization, we're doing something wrong. So we really need to look ourselves into the mirror and work towards a change, big time.
Absolutely. And Anders, don't we have to feel something for the European taxpayer, actually helping to sponsor state-sponsored child abuse that we're seeing with the Palestinian Authority? And because of this education system, how many thousands of Israelis and other foreign nationals have died in terrorist attacks, suicide bombings, whether they're eating in a restaurant, whether they're shopping in a shopping mall, or just walking down a street before being blown up? So this is something, isn't it, that goes to the heart of the peace process. So how can taxpayers hold our leaders to account here in Europe regarding the funding of this shocking education system?
Well, I think, isn't it said that the definition of insanity is to do the same over and over and expect a different result? And
for
we have
25
now
years.
been financing the Palestinian Authority for all the time it has been in existence. And to be honest, things have not progressed in a positive way. Even now, when we are seeing many of the Sunni Arab states actually approaching Israel in many ways, and not to the same extent as we saw in the past, using the Palestinian as an excuse to promote so-called Arab unity, a pan-Arab unity. It's more now a European concept that we think that this very special situation with the Palestinians, where you can have a hereditary status of refugees. You can have more or less a Western-sponsored government system where you pay your friends and family to become loyal to a authoritarian regime. All of these things are more or less something we as Europeans are the only one left defending. The Arabs are not really defending it anymore. No. The US have retracted from that policy. So I think Europe is actually standing more and more alone in this fight. But it also needs a change here, of course. And I think one of the things that we could also maybe include into this debate when we go forward to the European elections is the rise in anti-Semitism in Europe, and also the link that we're seeing Muslim diaspora here in Europe getting influenced by this hatred and the sort of localization of the Israel-Arab conflict in our own member countries here in the European Union. And I think that's quite dreadful. In these weeks, we are celebrating in Denmark the 75-year commemoration of our saving the Jewish population in Denmark to Sweden during the awful atrocities of Holocaust. And I think 75 years later, we don't see a Danish society that is as united in defense of the Jewish population as we were in 43 now in 2018. And that's what's concerning me the most about the situation here in Europe.
Yes. Excellent, what you just said there, Anders. And Marcus, sadly, many critics, many parliamentarians here in the European Parliament will actually say, well, what's the Israeli education system like in comparison to that of the Palestinian Authority? Can you tell us?
Indeed. In fact, yesterday, I was told quite clearly how awful the Israeli curriculum was. And I asked, based on what report, and could I see the report? It was just something which, somebody said off the top of their head because I thought it was a good argument. Firstly, it has to be said that one judges each curriculum in relation to UNESCO standards of peace and tolerance, not one against the other. However, as that does become a binary, the Israeli curriculum, and remember, it's a curriculum which is taught within a conflict situation, is, I think, in many ways very interesting. Why? Because the idea of peace suffuses the Israeli curriculum. Literally from first grade, the first thing that young Israelis are taught is to sing what we call in Hebrew the Shir Shalom, the song of peace. And, that goes on all the way to 12th grade, where, very complex arguments in relation to, peace treaties with Jordan, with Egypt, the Oslo Accords, how to reach peace in the region. It goes across the literature. It goes to history, obviously, and absolutely a key part of the Israeli curriculum. The second thing, which I think is notable, is the focus on Palestinian national identity. Within the Israeli curriculum, which might sound odd, but it is, especially given, the Israeli government is a right-wing government, and yet the Israeli curriculum is, very clearly focused on the Nakba, as the Palestinians call the events of 1948. My daughter just recently was studying this, and her opinion is asked about what happened in 1948, a real focus on Palestinian presence in the land before 1948. So there is an holistic view of Palestinian national identity.
That's excellent. And Thomas, we're only down to a minute and a half, but what's been the response of the European External Action Group to the freezing of this over 15 million euros to the Palestinian Authority?
As it is, we will have a meeting tomorrow with the head of division for Israel and the Palestinian territories. In the past, it has been there has been a denial. And as they have said, although we've shown them all the hard facts, they said, this is not systematic, this can't really be verified. And even they would go as far as to say, as we were just talking, that, it's probably just as bad on the other side, which is nonsense. I hope with the pressure now coming from the donor countries and even coming from the European Parliament, that obviously there will have to be a change of perspective. And let us hope and let us be optimistic and push this through. We know that changes doesn't just happen by itself. We all have to contribute in the way we can. So let us hope that this could be a beginning of something new. And thanks to the hard work that both of you have done.
And the hard work, you amazing gentlemen.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so very much, Marcus, and also Thomas and Anders, for what is a very important programme. And I just want to thank you for watching today's European report here in the European Parliament. And clearly, this is a major, major issue. If we want to see peace in the Middle East, then it starts with the education system. It starts with the children. Get that right, then we can really see peace in the Middle East. So thank you for watching today's European report.